ABC General Hospital Spoilers show that crisis had already started creeping into Port Charles. But the latest surprise involving Jocelyn and Carly hit like a storm no one saw coming. It started as quiet whispers, strange things happening around Windermere, and a feeling that something wasn't right. Even though nothing obvious had happened yet. But as soon as the shadows moved and the steady pressure from Cullum and Sidwell started closing in on them, everything shifted. The danger wasn't just an idea anymore. It was coming closer with a kind of sharp focus, almost like the two men had learned every fear and weak spot that both mother and daughter had. For Jocelyn, the danger brought back a familiar fear, old anxiety from when she'd been chased before. From being caught up in shady dealings she never wanted anything to do with. The idea that Cullum had gone through her past and knew things she wanted to forget sent a cold shiver down her spine. Something her bold front couldn't hide. She felt like she was falling apart. Scared not only for herself, but because danger always seemed to find its way back to the people she cared about. Carly, though, handled her fear in her own way. It felt like a pulse beneath her skin driving her onward instead of keeping her stuck. She used to dive straight into chaos without a second thought, but this time felt different. This time, the madness was planned and cold, carried out by men who lived for psychological warfare. Thinking about Jocelyn being targeted again stirred something deep inside her, a raw mix of guilt, anger, and a fierce need to keep her child safe no matter what. But underneath all that confidence, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd misjudged how far Cullum and Sidwell would actually push things. The two women ended up caught in a risky change they didn't completely get. The rules kept shifting just as fast as the threat did. Each step toward Windermere felt like walking further into a world shaped by someone else's hand. A trap woven from hidden secrets and old obsessions laid out long before either of them realized the risk. That rising feeling that someone was always watching, tracking, controlling brought a kind of fear between them that neither one wanted to talk about. It felt like an obsession, a kind of darkness focused right on them. Like their lives were just pieces on some twisted psychological chessboard. What made things even harder was feeling all alone. Jason was obviously worried, but there was no way he could be everywhere at the same time. Michael was dealing with his own crises spinning out of control. Sonny was caught up in his own fights. Nina, even though she was emotionally caught up in some of the fallout, just couldn't be the kind of protector they needed. The truth was clear. Carly and Jocelyn were trapped and they were running out of friends to turn to. They both felt that truth cut through them sharply, leaving no doubt or escape. They were looking for someone different. A new person. Someone who saw the dark reasons behind Cullum and Sidwell. Someone able to find their way through the shadows they were getting pulled into. The threat was moving quicker than they could handle, and even though Carly wanted to take it all on alone, she could tell Jocelyn was about to snap. The pressure was getting to them emotionally, pushing them into a place they didn't know well. Where just relying on instincts wasn't enough, it needed some real thinking and planning. Neither woman could deny the scary truth. Cullum and Sidwell weren't just on a mission, they actually liked the hunt. As the danger grew closer, it became clear this wasn't just an attack. It was a challenge to see how much a mother and daughter could take before something broke. That knowledge kept Carly up at night, thinking over all the warning signs she had brushed off and every dark hallway she had walked into. I'm sure she could outthink whatever was waiting around the corner. For Jocelyn, it was a mix of anger and fear. She was furious that once again men who loved control were deciding her fate, but at the same time, she was scared this time she might not get out okay. The tension between them grew. Driven by their different ways of dealing with things, Carly's fierce determination clashing with Jocelyn's quiet panic. But underneath all the fighting, there was a deeper understanding. They knew they couldn't handle what was ahead on their own. And then this weird feeling of acceptance started to creep in, heavy and impossible to ignore. If they wanted to get through what Cullum and Sidwell had started and keep both their lives and their sanity intact, they needed to find an ally who wasn't already worn down or on the brink. Someone who could step in before the threats got out of control. Someone who can face the madness without backing down. No matter who it was, Carly and Jocelyn were finally ready to face the truth they'd been avoiding for so long. The danger had grown beyond what either of them could handle. The only way forward was to find someone strong enough to stand between them and the darkness creeping closer. The pressure on Brennan had been creeping up for weeks, but now it hit him hard, trapping him in ways he never saw coming. Cullum, carrying secrets taken from the remnants of WSB operations, was tightening his hold with a sharpness that felt almost surgical. Every threat, every demand, every little hint that he knew way more than Brennan wanted to admit, just pushed Brennan further into a spiraling panic. He had spent years facing danger with the steady calm of someone who knew how to survive, but this time, it felt different. This was a guy who liked picking apart weaknesses and knew right where Brennan's flaws were. Brennan's biggest weakness was something Cullum didn't hesitate to use against him: his connection to Carly and Jocelyn. At first, Brennan thought he could manage both sides, the hidden life of secret missions and the delicate relationships he had formed in Port Charles. But this latest change turned everything upside down. Cullum wasn't just threatening two innocent women. He was also threatening to blow the lid on Brennan's part in a full dare. Messy tangle of WSB betrayals, failed missions, and secret alliances. Secrets Brennan had hidden away long before he ever met Carly were coming back up, and they brought a heavy sense of trouble with them. As Cullum and Sidwell pushed harder, Brennan realized the way forward was shrinking. Boiling down to one harsh fact, he couldn't keep his image safe, stay free, and look out for Carly and Jocelyn all at once. Something had to give. That truth hit him hard, chilling him so much he struggled to catch his breath. He understood what leaving them behind would mean, not just for their safety, but for the last bits of humanity he had struggled to hold on to. But Cullum's pressure kept building, twisting tighter like a coil that left no room to breathe and push for a response. The WSB secrets weren't just dangerous, they were downright disastrous. If Brennan gets exposed, he stands to lose it all: his career, his connections, his power, and maybe even his life. That fear started twisting his thinking, making him view Carly and Jocelyn not as people he cared about, but as risks he couldn't keep protecting. At first, the change in him was barely noticeable. He started missing calls, acting a bit distant, and disappearing for hours without saying a word. Carly noticed the distance well before she could put a finger on why, picking up on the shaky ground beneath his calm surface. Jocelyn, already overwhelmed by fear because of Cullum's wild obsession, saw that Brennan's eyes didn't hold that same urgency when he looked her way. Something important was slipping away from him, worn down by the weight of secrets too risky to voice. The real nightmare of this new chapter was seeing Brennan change, fall apart, and become someone who might put his own safety ahead of the people he had once vowed to keep safe. The disaster crept in slowly and painfully as Brennan started pulling away from the chaos around Carly and Jocelyn. He kept telling himself it was just temporary, that he needed some space to figure things out, but deep inside, he already knew what was really going on. Cullum had him backed into a corner, emotionally, psychologically, and professionally. Under that heavy pressure, Brennan started to believe that leaving them was maybe the only choice he had left. He told himself in those quiet moments, whispering excuses in his head, he wasn't any use to them dead. He had to stay alive to stop Cullum, and maybe they'd be safer without him around. The truth was tougher than that. Fear had shifted him, and in the end, he was looking out for himself. For Carly, the realization hit her like a sharp blade. She had gone through betrayal before, but this time it felt different. She thought she could trust this man, someone who held heavy secrets, but somehow still made her feel grounded. For Jocelyn, the shock hit even harder, shaking her more than anyone expected. She kept trying to stay strong, even though she was being watched, hunted, and pushed into a tough mental spot. Losing Brennan's protection, and with it the sense of safety she had, it would just throw her further into the emotional chaos that Cullum seemed to feed off. As Brennan stepped back, the world around Carly and Jocelyn suddenly twisted and shook. Without him by their side, they were left open and vulnerable, having to confront the darkest threat they had ever faced. This new change, the abandonment, showed just how deeply Cullum had affected the delicate balance of their lives. It wasn't just about danger now. It was about betrayal, change, and the breakdown of trust. Brennan wasn't the shield anymore, the one keeping the madness at bay. He sparked a disaster that quickly got out of hand, and nobody had time to stop it before things went too far. The latest twist in the story took a darker turn that nobody in Port Charles expected, showing how the obsession creeping toward Carly and Jocelyn had grown into something troubling. What started as fear turned into something much darker as Cullum kept chasing them, winding the psychological grip tighter with a kind of cruelty that seemed almost like he was following some twisted axis untraceable. To 10. The story felt like it was turning darker, with each change a new detail bringing mother and daughter closer to the fire. Cullum wasn't content with just threats or watching anymore. He wanted to trap them, to push them into a corner, to wear them down bit by bit in the rising fear until all that remained was panic, loneliness, and total breakdown. His methods got more and more cruel as time went on. Strange messages, twisted surroundings, and the feeling that someone was watching him even when he was safe at home. All of it was part of what he planned. He wanted Carly to break under the burden of feeling powerless, and he wanted Jocelyn to face every painful memory she had struggled so hard to forget. This wasn't just danger. It was a mental beating. A steady effort to wear them down and strip away their strength until they had nothing left to fight back with. For the first time in a long while, Carly felt fear take hold more than her usual urge to fight back. She noticed the difference in Jocelyn, the shaky hands, the sleepless nights, that feeling like she was sinking in something she couldn't escape. The situation was getting worse quicker than they could grasp, and the cracks in their defenses were starting to show too clearly to ignore. That was the moment Jason felt things change. He had a knack for sensing danger way before anyone else did, and this time was clear as day. Cullum wasn't just on the hunt anymore, he was getting ready to hit. The knowledge sparked a fierce fire in him. The same feeling that always came up when people he cared about were in danger. He understood that Carly's silence wasn't about being strong. It was really fear hiding behind stubbornness. He could tell that Jocelyn's boldness was really just a fragile cover hiding her fear. When Jason saw Cullum was cooking them, gradually turning up the pressure to break them mentally before finishing to them off physically, he knew they couldn't handle this on their own anymore. Sunny felt the storm coming as well. Even with his own struggles, the change in the air between Carly and Jocelyn cut through the chaos. Sunny had gone up against plenty of foes over time, but Cullum felt like something else entirely. He wasn't driven by power, money, or territory. He was pushed by obsession, a warped loyalty to Sidwell, and the leftover pieces of a project that came from the darkest parts of WSB history. An enemy like that just wouldn't give up. He got more worked up, and Sunny understood all too well that once obsession took over, destruction was bound to follow. Jason and Sunny ended up drawn back into a quiet partnership, not because they wanted to be, but because they had to. The risk was just too high, too wild, and unpredictable for either of them to brush off. They got how serious it was right away. This wasn't a simple rescue or an easy fight. This was a fight against a predator who had already planned out every move. Carly and Jocelyn were already stuck inside it. As they got ready to step in, the seriousness of what was happening really hit them. If they messed up even one time, the consequences would be impossible to fix. Cullum had crafted a nightmare, setting up threats and traps meant to wear down his targets mentally and emotionally well before landing the final blow. The Fum Hall wasn't just an idea, it was happening right then and there. The only thing keeping Carly and Jocelyn from total devastation were the two men who had stood by them through every storm. Even Jason and Sunny could sense it. This time the stakes were something else. This time the obsession wasn't only about following their loved ones, it took over everything around them.